So let's try this again. So today, or I was saying how yesterday we learned about 4 special types of angles. And that is super important that you keep remembering. And then as well as today, we're gonna learn 4 rules that pertain to those 4 types of angles. And that's another thing that you'll have to remember. Okay, so yesterday, first of all, to remind you, corresponding angles were in the same position. So if I said angle 1, which angle down there was in the same position as angle 1? 5, right? And then wasn't it 2 and 6, 3 and 7, and 4 and 8? So how today is going to be different is they're not just gonna ask you, are these angles corresponding? Instead, what they're gonna do is say, angle 1 is 2x plus 1, and this angle is 81, and find x. So what we would do in this situation is use this rule right here, that corresponding angles are congruent. Okay, so what you would do there then is you'd have to say 2x plus 1 equals 81 and solve that for x, okay? So what you have to remember is corresponding angles are congruent. And I'll have you write that on your cheat sheet in a little bit. Then, if we look at this, it says find the measure of 15, and what they give us is that angle 1 is 51, okay? Now, when they give us angle 1 and they ask us for angle 15, what do we know about 11 and 15? They are corresponding, so they're congruent. So do you guys get that angle 15 would be 51? And when they say, if they say today at all, tell which postulates or theorems you used, you do not have to do that, okay? Then they ask us to find the measure of angle 16. Now, from what you guys know, think of just these 4 angles. Do we know something about 15 and 16? They are vertical, right? And what do we know about vertical? They're the same. So this would be 51. Now, a really easy way for you guys to think about this is when you have this situation, this angle, this angle, this angle, and that angle are all going to be the same. So these 2 vertical as well as these 2 vertical. And one thing I should have pointed out, everything we learn today only works if your lines are parallel. If your lines are not parallel, nothing I say today works, okay? Now, so that one is also 51. Now let's just, I don't think they ask us for this, but I just wanna go over this. Do you guys know how I could find angle 10 if I know that 11 is 51? Yep.
You could like have 10 be x plus 51 equals 180.
Equals 180. Because 10 and 11 form a line, they should add up to 180. So do you guys get that 10 would be 180 minus 59, which would be what, 121? Now, if this is 121,
It's 51.
oh, you're right. Thank you. Okay, so this was 51, so this would be 129. Okay, now if this is 129, that makes this 129, and then this one 129, and this one 129. So it's like these 2 vertical and these 2 vertical are gonna be the same, and then these 2 vertical and those 2 vertical are the same. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's go down to this one. Now, do you guys know what that means right there?
Parallel?
Parallel, yes. So that means these are parallel. And again, the only way we can use everything that I say today is if these are parallel, okay? Now they say angle 18 is 42, and the first thing they want us to find is angle 22. What would that be? 42 because they are corresponding. Very good. And if they ever ask you to say why, don't worry about that. And then they ask us down here to find angle 25. What do you think that would be? 42 also. Wouldn't this one be 42 also? Yes. Okay. So now let's go to this page right here. So we're gonna learn a theorem about all four types of angles that we did, okay? And again, these only work if our lines are parallel. And this first one, or the second one that we're learning is about alternate interior angles. Do you guys get alternate interior would be like 3 and 6, right? And what this is saying is if your two lines are parallel, our alternate interior angles are congruent again. So just like corresponding, alternate interior are congruent, all right? Then let's look at this page. And again, if we have alternate exterior angles and these two lines are parallel, our alternate exterior angles are congruent. Would you guys know that 1 and 8 are alternate exterior, right? So those would be congruent too if your two lines are parallel. Now, what would be really nice is if all of our groups would be congruent, but there's one that's different. The one that is not congruent are the ones that are consecutive interior angles. One thing I just want to point out, if you guys look on this second line here towards the back, you'll see that alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding are on the wall. Consecutive interior is not on the wall. The one that's not on the wall is the one that's supplementary. So if you're ever in the room and you're like, gosh, which one was it that was supplementary? The 3 that are on the wall are congruent. The ones that's not on the wall is the ones that are supplementary, okay? So if we look here, this might be something that you want to write down, but I can shorten this, okay? Here's what we're going to write down.
We have it on there.
No, I meant like on is it on your cheat sheet? Oh, perfect, perfect. So if you have two parallel lines cut by a transversal, your corresponding angles are congruent, your alternate interior angles are congruent, your alternate exterior are congruent, but your consecutive interior are supplementary, okay? All right, so now let's go to our next page here. Now this is a theorem that the book has. Honestly, I don't use it too much, but what it says is if you have two parallel lines and you have a transversal that's perpendicular to one of the parallel lines, it's also going to be perpendicular to the other. And then, do you guys remember if that's a right angle? Aren't all 4 of those right angles? Okay. And if this is a right angle, all 4 of these are a right angle, so all 8 of them are right angles. Okay. So let's look at this example, and it says the diagram represents the floor tiles in Michelle's house. If measure of angle 2 is 125, find the measure of angle 3. Now, something that should be in this diagram that's not, is they should tell us that these two are parallel and probably another set. But for right now, they would have to tell us that these two are parallel for us to do this. Now, look at just angles 2 and 3. Can you tell what kind those are? Alternate interior, and are those congruent? Yes. So wouldn't this be 125, right? So angle 3 is 125, and then they ask us for angle 4. Is that easy to find if these two form a straight line? Yeah, what would they add up to? 180. So do you guys get angle 4 would be 180 minus 125, which would be 55. So angle 4 is 55. Sometimes when you use a printer, they don't do angles and they'll put in weird symbols for that, but that's all that is there. Okay, so this one here, it says the measure of angle 5 is 2x minus 10. And the measure of angle 7 is x plus 15. So honestly, in this problem, they don't use this part at all. We just have to find x. So just look at these two. What kind are they? Can you tell? Corresponding. And what do we know about corresponding? They're congruent or equal. So what we would do is we would say here that 2x minus 10 equals x plus 15, and we would solve for x, okay? So what I'm gonna do here is subtract x. 2x minus x is x minus 10 equals 15. Then I'm gonna add 10, and I get x equals 25. And that is all they wanted us to do here. They do have a 4, a 6, and an 8, but they don't ask us for those. So that's all we have to do, okay? Now let's go to this page right here. And I can tell you guys that a question just like this is going to be on your quiz. And I think I told you guys, I think on Monday next week we're doing section 2.8, Tuesday we're doing 2.9, and then Wednesday would be a practice test / quiz. It would be from algebra proofs on, and then on Thursday is our test. So what I mean by like algebra proofs on, did I tell you guys already, like law of detachment won't be on there, law of syllogism won't. Do you know like the inverse, converse, contrapositive, that won't be on there? So just because you already tested on that, I'm just not testing you on this, but I believe this same question is on your quiz next week, so you might want to put a little note there. The only difference would be that they might change these two numbers, okay, but it's the same idea. So here's what they're saying here. They are saying that angle 3 right here is 75, and angle 10 right here is 115, okay? Now, this is a question that a lot of kids get confused on, and the reason is these two lines are parallel, and you can tell that because of these arrows, but these two lines are not, okay? So a lot of kids would look at this and they'd think, well, if angle 3 is 75, angle 11 is 75 because they are corresponding. However, we can't say that because line W and line X are not parallel. So what that means with everything we do on this problem, we have to use line Z and line Y, and then the transversals W and X. So here's what I would do. I would start right here, okay? Do you guys remember me saying, if this is 75, that's 75, right? And then do you get that this would be 75 because these are alternate interior, and then these are vertical, so that's 75? Everybody understand that? Now, how would I find the other 4? Don't 4 and 8 add up to 180? So if 8 is 75, the other one would be 180 minus 75, which is 105, okay? So all four of these are going to be 105, okay? Now, I get a question all the time when people are taking this quiz and they're like, how are 2 and 10 not the same? Because they're corresponding. The reason they're not the same is these two lines are not parallel. Just these two are. So now let's go over to this group of 8 angles, okay? If this is 115, what's angle 13? 115 because they're vertical. What would angle 15 be? If that's 10 is 115, what would 15 be? 115, right? Because they're alternate interior. And then how about 12? 115, very good. So those four are 115. Now to find the other four, how do I find 16? Yeah, 180 minus 115, which is 65. So that means this is 65, this is 65, this is 65, this is 65. Okay? Now let's go over and fill in what they're asking us. So one of the things they asked us for is angle 2, that's 105. Then they asked us for angle 7, which is 105. Then they asked us for angle 14, which is 65. Angle 5 is 105. Angle 15 is 115. And angle 9 is 65. So that is the answer. Okay. All right. So now let's look here. And they tell us in this one that angle 4 right here is 2x minus 17. And angle 1 right here is 85. Okay? This is something that is going to happen today. They're going to give you two angles, and you're going to look at them, and you're going to be like, those aren't any of the four that we learned. Okay? So here's what you would do in that case. Here's what I do. You know how this 81, or this angle 1 is 85? I usually move that to the spot that's corresponding with it. So do you guys get if that's 85, isn't angle 7 85, right? Now, could I write something with these two if they form a straight line? What would I know?
Add them up, they would equal to 180.
Yes. So if I ever have two angles that I don't know a relationship between, I move one of them to its corresponding spot, and then I look at what relationship I know. And what I know here is that 2x minus 17 plus 85 should equal 180. Okay? Now, negative 17 plus 85 would be what, 68? Is that right? I believe. Okay, then I'm gonna subtract 68, and I would get 2x equals 112, divide by 2, and x is 56. And that is what we want to find. So that is our answer. Okay. Now let's go down to this one. Now are these two ones that we do know something about? What kind are they?
Alternate exterior.
Alternate exterior. And what do we know about alternate exterior? They're congruent. So I'm gonna just set them equal, right? So I'm gonna go x minus 10 equals 104. I'm gonna add 10. And x is 114. That is my answer. Okay. Now let's go down to this one. If they ever ask you today to explain your reasoning, you don't have to do that, okay? So we're just gonna find y here. And what they're telling us is that angle 5 right here is 68, and angle 3 right here is 3y minus 2. Are 5 and 3 angles we know? Yeah, what kind? Consecutive interior. That's the one that's not on the wall, so what do we know about it? Yep, they're supplementary, they add up to 180. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add these together. I always put the one with the y first. So I'm gonna go 3y minus 2 plus 68 equals 180. And we did that because these are consecutive interior. Now, these two I can combine, and if you take -2 plus 68, that's gonna give you 66. Then I'm gonna subtract 66, and I get 3y equals 114. Divide by 3, and y would be 38. Okay, and I believe that's all we had to do is find y. Yes, okay. Then we have 2 more pages, okay? So, another thing that they will do today is they'll give you a problem that has x's and y's, okay? When they do this, if I have 2 things with x's and only 1 thing with y, that means I do something with my x's first and try to solve that. Do I know anything about the 2 x's that they gave me? No, they're not any of those 4 types. So that is when I take one of them and I move it. I could either move the 9x plus 12 down to this spot right there, or I could move the 3x up to this spot right here. Either way you want to do it. I think I'm going to put the 3x right here. Now, what do I know about the 9x plus 12 and the 3x? Yes, they make a line, which means they add up to 180. So I'm going to go 9x plus 12 plus 3x equals 180. Okay, 9x plus 3x is 12x plus 12 equals 180. Then I'm going to subtract 12, and I get 12x equals 168. Divide by 12, and x is 14. Right? Yes. Okay. Now I know what my x is, and now I need to find what my y is. I could take this 14 and put it back into this angle right here, this angle right here, or this angle right there, and find that angle, and then do some type of relationship between the two. Now, actually, I wouldn't want to do this one because there's no relationship between that 3x and the 4y minus 10. And it would be easier to put that in here just because it's a smaller expression. So let's take 14 and put it in there. 3 times 14 is going to give us 42. So this angle is 42. Now, what would I know about those two? If they form a line, what do I know? Equal 180. So what I'm going to do is add them together. Okay, so I'm going to do 4y minus 10 plus 42 equals 180. And then I'm going to combine my negative 10 and my 42. So I'm going to add 32. equals 180. Okay. Then I'm going to subtract 32. And I get 4y equals 148. Okay. Divide by 4. And y is, let's see, I believe that would be 37. Okay. So, now let's see, did I solve for both? I did. Okay. So that will happen sometimes where you have to solve for both. So if we go to this next one, notice this next one has 2 things with y and only 1 thing with x. So what that tells me is to start with my y's. Now, do you realize those 2 aren't any that we've learned? So I have to move one of them, correct? Doesn't matter which one you move. I think I'm gonna move, it really doesn't matter. I'm gonna move the 3y right here, okay? And I moved it there, why? How could I move it to that spot? It's the corresponding spot. Yes, so you can always move it to a corresponding spot, okay? Now, these 2 form a line, so what do we know about them? They equal 180. So I can go 5y minus 4 plus 3y equals 180. 5y plus 3y is 8y minus 4 equals 180. Okay, then I'm going to add 4 and I get 8y equals 184. Divide by 8 and y would be 23. Okay, now what I need to do next is substitute that y back in somewhere here, okay? And the one that I have a correlation between is these 2. What kind are those 2 with the green dots? They're corresponding, they're in the same position. If I put y in for 3y, 3 times 23 is 69, that's gonna go right here. And like Lexi said, those are corresponding, and corresponding are what? Equal or equal to 180? Equal to each other. So then what I can do is say that that 2x plus 13 right here is going to equal 69, and I can solve that for x. So I subtract 13 and I get 2x equals 56. Divide by 2 and x is 28. Okay. Then if we go down to our next one here, okay. One thing, if you ever are wondering, especially if it's on like a test or something, if you're like, does this 40 mean that angle or this angle? Always ask me, but in this case, they mean 40 is that angle right there, okay? Now, I could solve for x right away. What relationship would the 5x and the 40 have? Don't they together form this straight line? So they would equal 180. So I can go 5x plus 40 equals 180. Okay, subtract 40 and 5x equals 140. Divide by 5, and x is, when you go 5 into 140, I believe you're going to get 28. Okay, now we know what x is, and we have to now go and find out what our y is. Okay, since I have 40 and it's an actual number I don't have to substitute in for, I'm gonna use that 40 to find what 3y minus 1 is. But that 40 and the 3y minus 1 are not a type that we know again. When I try to move the 40, I move it to the corresponding spot, okay? Do you guys get that this and this are corresponding? Do you get that? This angle right here and this angle right here are corresponding because you're looking at these two parallel lines and this transversal. So if that's 40, this is 40, okay? And then can I write a relationship between these two? I can. What do I know about those two? They equal 180. So I would go 3y minus 1 plus 40 equals 180. Now, if you guys are doing this today and you get a really wonky decimal, then I would think, okay, maybe I screwed up. Maybe I set it up wrong, or I did my algebra wrong. Negative 1 plus 40 is 39. Then I'm going to subtract 39. And I get that 3y equals 180 minus 39 is 141. Then I'm going to divide by 3, and y is 47. Okay. All right, last page. Okay. So here's another thing that you're going to see today. This particular one also has two different variables. These two lines are parallel, and you guys are just kind of learning this. If it would help you to extend these lines at all, if that helps you to tell what kind of angles these are, you can certainly do that. Okay, so if that helps you, always feel free to extend those. Now, does anyone see a relationship with the 5y and the 120? They are consecutive interior. And what do we know about consecutive interior? Equal 180. That's not on the wall, so they equal 180. So I can go 5y plus 120 equals 180. Then I'm going to subtract 120, and I get 5y equals 60. Divide by 5, and y is 12. Okay, now we should be able to write something with our x that's separate from that because we have this transversal and these two parallel lines. Do you guys recognize the 2x and the 108 as any type? Alternate interior. So wouldn't these two be equal, right? Because alternate interior are equal. So 2x equals 108, divide by 2, and x would be 54. Okay? Then, if I look at this one, again, if you struggle, feel free to extend lines. Because that might help you see the difference. Now again, sometimes what's going to happen is they're going to give you an angle, and you're going to be like, which angle is that for? Is this 3y plus 40 for the first one or the second one? Typically you can think, if there's a degree measure, the angle that it's closest to would be that angle. So this angle is for right there, okay? Now, let's find x first. So let's ignore this whole top and just look at these two parallel lines and this transversal. What kind are the x and the 120? consecutive interior, and what do we know about that? Equal to 180. So do you guys get basically what you could do there is x plus 120 equals 180? Or you could have just subtracted 120 from 180, whichever is easier for you there. So we got what x is.
Why would you do the x's together?
Good question. The reason you can't, oh, were you thinking alternate interior? Good question. Anyone see why we can't do alternate interior? Because these two lines are not parallel. Good question. You can't do the two x's together because those two lines are not parallel. So you have to use the fact that you have these two parallel with that line and then find x. Now, do we know something about these two angles? They form a, don't these two form a line? So what should they be? Equal to 180. Could I put my x in here and find what that angle is? What is 3 times 60 minus 70? 180, is that 110? I believe. Okay. Now do you guys understand that the 3y plus 40 plus 110 is going to equal 180? So I can go 3y plus 40 plus 110 equals 180. Okay, now these two I can add together. 40 plus 110 is 150. Then I'm going to subtract 150. And I get 3y equals 30. Divide by 3. And y is 10. Okay, so that is my x and that is my y. Now your assignment for today, these are going to be in the book and these are going to be on a worksheet, but a lot of them are like quicker. There's some that are going to take you a while, but some of them are quicker. So I will get you the worksheet and then you're going to do the book ones on, for some reason when I did these I didn't do back to back. So if you wanted to, you could do the book pages on the back of one of these sheets, and if you do that, just write me a note on the top sheet that you did the book problems on the back of one of these. Did you think it was hard today? Too bad? Long, yes. Better than proof still?